This is going to be a video just kind of talking about how to use each of the tools that are on the site, talking about maybe some future plans for other tools that I'd like to create, talking about some of the tools that I want to turn into web applications on the site so they're a little bit more user-friendly. We'll talk through all of that. But most of this is just going to be going over each one of the individual tools and each one of the things on the site that you're going to be able to utilize in NBA DFS every single day. And I'll talk about the things that I prefer to use, the things that I think are the most valuable in each one of the metrics, and how to just kind of navigate the tools themselves. This is going to be something that I keep up on the page itself in front of the models so that you can always go back and reference it and get an idea of where you need to go for each individual thing. So if you are not logged into the stream, then that's okay, man. You can watch it afterwards. So 34 Midway Monster, what's up, dude? How you doing today? Hope you're doing great. I'm drinking tea. I just had some McDonald's, which is great. Happy about it. All right, so first thing that we're going to be looking at is the NBA Defensive Efficiency Matchups tool. This is something that I utilize every single day. What it is a measure of the boosts that each individual team is allowing to each individual position. So with most DFS sports, we don't really care that much about defense. In NFL, we don't really care about defense. In PGA, obviously, we don't care about defense. In NHL, we don't care about defense. In MLB, we care about the pitcher for sure, but we don't care about like outfield defense or anything like that. In NBA, I do think that there's quite a bit of value in caring about the defense that you're facing. And more specifically, I think that it's important to look at where the defenses are strong or weak. You don't want to be playing a point guard against a team that is very weak against centers. You don't want to be playing a power forward against a team that's very strong or that is very weak against shooting guards. Like, you want to be exploiting the weak points of defenses. So this tool was built up, originally it was in an Excel embed, but I have built this one up into a web application. So the first tab that you're going to have is this team search, where you can choose one of the teams in the league. You can just choose New York, check weaknesses. And what it's going to do is it's going to shoot up a graph as well as a table to show you where the boosts are applied. So for the New York Knicks, there's a 21% boost in points allowed to point guards, but it's a 19% drop in efficiency in terms of rebounds allowed to point guards. There's a 29% drop in points allowed to centers, but there's only a 9% drop in terms of rebounds allowed to centers. So this is actually a pretty bad matchup for centers. You can see that over here in the FPPM boost. This stands for fantasy points per minute. Centers just don't do very well in this matchup against New York Knicks last year. And I will point that out that I am making this video on the first day of the new season for 2020. So these are not going to be updated yet. They will be updated once we have about a week of data. I use a 10-game rolling sample for this. You need to make sure that you are catching all the injuries and catching like rotational differences and stuff like that teams adjust to throughout the season. So this is a 10-day rolling sample. This is data from the last season, the season that ended in July, or whenever the fuck it ended. But you're going to be able to use this next week, probably like next Friday. It's going to be something that I will check every single day. So this tool is going to show you where specifically each team is weak, where they are giving up certain points, where they are giving up less advantages, stuff like that. The next tab is the overall efficiency tab. This is for the full team. So like if you sort this by fantasy points per minute boost, the team that is giving up the most fantasy points per minute above league average would be Minnesota to all positions. They don't give up as many 3-point percentage boosts, but they give up the most fantasy points per minute boost. The team giving up the most efficiency in terms of 3-point percentage shooting is Golden State, followed by Utah, and then Dallas. So things like that. This is going to be kind of like a resource to let you make more informed decisions on the players that you want to take against each team. So you would want to take a Steph Curry or Damian Lillard against Utah, since they give up such a large percentage of efficiency above average to 3-point shooters. In terms of rebounds, you would want to take centers against Orlando and Houston and Indiana. You would want to take playmakers against Minnesota, Cleveland, Sacramento, stuff like that. And then we have the individual position sheets as well. So point guard, shooting guard, small forward, power forward, center. And this is going to show you the average points allowed to the position, the average rebounds allowed, average assists, steals, blocks, and then it'll give you the same boosts that you see on the other tabs that I've already showed. This one also gives you the average fantasy points per minute allowed to the position. So Sacramento allowing 1.25 fantasy points per minute to opposing point guards. Minnesota 1.22. The team that's allowing the worst is Denver, followed by Chicago and then Miami. So this is a free resource. This one is going to be free all year. It's something that I want people to be able to utilize and people to be able to come to Paydirt and have something that they can use. It is worth noting that all of these defensive adjustments will be included in the projections as well. So if you're looking at this and saying, okay, well, it's kind of hard for me to know how to apply a fantasy point per minute boost or a 3-point percentage boost or anything like that, you don't have to do that. If you have a subscription to the site, then that's all included in the projections. So this is something that I hope everybody can utilize, and I'm really, really big on making improvements and fixing things and taking feedback and taking criticism. So if you use these and you have some suggestions for things that you think would be cool, please let me know. I'm always open to that kind of stuff. I like building new things. So that is going to be the main free tool on the website. Answer some questions real quick. Marvel's Universe, since it's day one, it's hard to quantify where a defense is strong or weak, or is there direct carryover? And then I answered your question. Yeah, no, it's okay. I will say that there are some defenses that are still going to be strong or weak in certain areas. Like Utah is probably the same team from last year, since they didn't really make huge adjustments to their roster. But teams that have made big adjustments to their rosters, they're just crapshoots. Realistically, the first 2 weeks of the NBA season, you don't really care about defensive matchups at all. All of my projections are going to be utilizing just baselines, period, and minutes adjustments for rotations until we have a couple games of data for defensive matchups. Like I said, I think probably next Friday you're going to be able to utilize defensive matchups, but currently you can't really use them because, one, there's not very much carryover, and two, people think that there might be carryover, and if people think that there's carryover, then there's probably edge in fading the public and thinking that, because it's all mostly random right now. The next thing that I wanted to show is the NBA prop betting tool. So this is a subscriber-based tool. It is only available to subscribers to the site. And this is one of my favorite tools that I've built. You'll notice that this is the same model from NFL. The NFL model was actually built off of this model. So this is the original logic for the model, is the NBA prop betting tool. And this is a really, really cool tool where you can type in a player's name here, and then it's going to populate these averages, these medians that they have, and then you're going to be able to put in whatever over/under that you were looking at, as well as the line on the over, and it'll tell you whether to take that bet. So for Anthony Davis specifically, he has a median fantasy point expectation of 54.91. He's expected to have 12.5 rebounds, 3.25 assists, 2.26 blocks. So if you are looking at a book, say that you're looking at, the DraftKings Sportsbook, or if you're looking at FanDuel Sportsbook or anything like that, you can plug in the props that you were looking at here, and on the back end, it actually does have on the back end all of the probabilities of him hitting certain thresholds. So he has a 35% chance to have 15 or more rebounds. He has a 42% chance to have 29 or more points. So let's say for points, for instance, if you were offered a line on 30 points or 30.5 points, you just type that in there for the total on the prop, and then you type in the line for the over that you're looking at, that you're being given, not the line for the under, but the line for the over, and say that it was, plus 150. So at plus 150, this is a bad bet, because plus 150 is a 40% odds given. And then the probability of him hitting that is 37% based on the model. So because of that, he has less of a probability of hitting the odds offered, so you would take the under. Now, if this were plus 200, then you would take the over, because that means that he has a better chance, a better probability of hitting 30.5 or more points, 31 points, based on the model. You can do the same thing with any of these props that are offered. Assists, points, rebounds, assists, steals, all this different kind of stuff. You can do it for all of these different things. You just type in a different player up here. We'll go Steph Curry. And Steph Curry is implied for 4.38 threes on median. So if you were given a line of 5 and you were given a line of like 175 or something like that, then you would want to take the over. But if you were given a line of negative 150, then you would want to take the under, and that's pretty significant under. So this is a really, really cool tool. I built it to be very manageable and very flexible. So instead of me just giving people plays that I think are the best, you can go out there and you can find props and you can plug them into this tool, and this tool will tell you if they are worth betting. It is something that is very wide open, so you're not just using lines from one book. You're not just using them from DraftKings or FanDuel or PointsBet or anything like that. You can plug them in yourself, and then you can find out if you want to have to actually take those bets. So this is a subscriber-based tool and something that is very cool and very fun to use. This will be put into a web application as soon as I can figure out the way that I actually want to put it into a web application. Because there's some user interface stuff that I'm not really a web designer. I know how to do web design, but I'm not really that fucking great at it. So it takes me a little while to figure out the user interface stuff, but the backend code, this will be very easy for me to backend code next week. I'm hoping to have this done by next weekend in a web app form. But currently, this is the form that it exists in. And then the last thing that we are going to look at is the masterpiece for the range of outcomes. This is the NBA DFS range of outcome sheets. These are going to be for both DraftKings and FanDuel. I have separate models on the site. So when you actually go to the site and you go to NBA and then you go to the NBA range of outcomes, DraftKings will be the first one that you see, and then as you scroll down, there's another one for FanDuel as well. And there is a little breakdown down here of each of the individual metrics that you're going to be seeing. But I'm going to talk through these a little bit more, and actually I need to update these because XVal it has been introduced as well, and TVal is a little bit different than what it is labeled there. But first off, before we get into the actual ranges, which is right here, we're going to talk about this. So this is kind of the opening sheet that you're going to have. This is the opening tab. This is the value and leverage viz. And value and leverage viz is value and leverage visual. So what this is showing you in the TVal percentage counts and ranges, what this is a overall look at the slate in terms of where the value is at in the price ranges. So when you're thinking about how to build for NBA GPPs and when you're thinking about how to build for NBA DFS, one of the main things that you have to think about is roster construction and the different distribution of salary ranges that you have in your lineups. So each individual day is not going to be the same kind of path to construction. There are going to be days where there are injuries to players, and that's going to open up a lot of really cheap value players that are in really, really good spots to do well. In days like that, you're probably going to have 2 or 3 players in the $4,500 or lower range, and 2 players in the very, very high stud range. We call those days stars and scrubs. Other days, like today, like the opening day of NBA, there aren't any injuries really to take advantage of. So most of the value is going to lay somewhere in the mid-range. As you can see, there's only a couple players, $5,000 or below, that are actually looking like they're going to be hitting their GPP value very often. And I'll talk about TVal here in a little while. But you're going to be seeing that most of the mid-range, that there are quite a few more players that are looking like they're actually going to hit their GPP value in that $6,000 and up range. And in the $9,000 range, we have a whole bunch of players that look like they're actually priced under what they should be. So this is a day where you're likely going to be wanting to build mid-range. You're likely going to be wanting to look below the 10K range and in that $9,000, $6,000 to $9,000 range, where you might be able to fit 2 or even 3 of those $8,000 to $9,000 players, along with a couple $4,000 or $5,000 ones. Hey, thanks for the subscription, dude. I appreciate you. You're awesome. And this is something I look out for every single slate. When I run the numbers, I just want to see kind of how I should be thinking about building lineups. If I look at this and I see that there are multiple players in the 3 or 4K range that are looking like really, really good values for the day, I already know that I want to be trying to build stars and scrubs. I already know that most of the field is likely going to be trying to build that way as well. And both of those are pretty valuable pieces of information. Not only how I should be expecting to be building, but also how I should be expecting the field to be building. If I am putting out a lineup into a large field GPP, maybe I don't want to follow that same way that the rest of the field is building. Maybe I don't want to go stars and scrubs, even if there are very cheap players that look like they're going to be hitting value. It's just important to know kind of how the rest of the field wants to look at the slate and how you should be looking at the slate as well. After you've gone to the value and leverage viz, you jump into the overall tab, and this is kind of like where you're going to be spending most of your time in terms of breaking down the slate, looking at players that you want to be utilizing, looking at players that are over undervalued. This is where most of the metrics are actually sitting. So what you're looking at here is a collection of different metrics, and I'll break down each one of them. So player, team, position, salary, all of this stuff is like, you know what this is. The top finish column right here is how often out of 5,000 individual player simulations a player finishes as the top overall scorer on the slate. So on this specific slate, on this little 2-gamer, Anthony Davis and Steph Curry are the ones that should be expected to finish as the top finishers on the slate. This is going to be a bit less variant when I'm not using defensive ranks. Oh, hey, Hoot, thank you, dude. Thanks for subscribing. Look at you guys subscribing all over the place. That's awesome. You guys are great. I'll get you guys some cookies sometime. So that is why we only have 2 players here that have a chance of being the top overall finishers, is because their baselines are just that much better than everybody else on this slate. When we have defensive adjustments, you end up having players that are a little bit more variant, like maybe Curry is in a bad matchup where his 3-pointer is going to be a little bit more variant. Maybe Anthony Davis doesn't have as many chances at rebounds, stuff like that. And then you start breaking into a whole bunch of different guys that might be the top finishers. Maybe 5 or 6 guys that have a chance of being the top overall finishers on the slate. The top 5 and the top 10 are similar logic. This is how often each individual player ends up as a top 5 overall finisher on the slate. So Anthony Davis and Steph Curry obviously going to be way up there. Kyrie Irving ending up there 99% of the time, which is quite a bit. Kawhi Leonard and LeBron James both up there as well. Kevin Durant only 0.38% of the time. His baselines don't look that good. So this is how often the players out of those 5,000 simulations are top 5 overall scorers, and this is top 10 overall scorers. The projection is just the median projection from the simulations. This is just a projection that you would find anywhere else. This is my take on it. Ownership is going to be the projected ownership for the player for the slate. What I usually will do is use an aggregate of ownership. So I will use a combination of a whole bunch of different ownership sources from across the industry so that I can try to have them be as robust as possible. I don't like to try to just use one, and I don't have my own model for NBA yet. Hopefully I can build one this year. But I use an aggregate of like 5 different sources so that I can just put them all together and find the best and most robust version of ownership percentages that I can find. Value percentage. Value percentage is not quite as easy as just like 5x or 6x. I believe that the formula that I actually utilize is something like basically 5x plus 6. basically. So what you want to be aiming for is in GPPs, value is different between a 10K player and a 3K player, right? So a 10K player doesn't need to score 75 fantasy points to actually hit value. They need to score like 59 fantasy points to meet value, or 61 or 62 or something like that. Whereas a $3,000 player doesn't need to score just 15 fantasy points to meet value, right? Like they need to score between 25 and 28 fantasy points. It's kind of a sliding scale. So the algorithm that I use for it is actually pretty complicated. I came up with it back when I worked at Numberball. And it's something that takes into account kind of a sliding scale based on the price of the player. And just know that it is a little bit more complicated than just 5x or 6x. Because when you get 5x or 6x with a 3K player, you didn't really do all that well. Like tonight, if Talon Horton Tucker ended up with like 14 fantasy points, he did okay, all things considered, but he didn't actually do well. With a 3K or 4K player, if they're not scoring 25 fantasy points, then you didn't really get that much value out of them. Yes, they let you fit some of the more expensive players, but it wasn't really that valuable. So just understand that with the value percentage, this is how often they meet value according to my algorithm, which is a little bit different than the regular value algorithm. That's why when you see this and you think, oh, well, let's see, Luke Kennard at 3,600, like, his projection is 12.67 and he only hits value 1.82% of the time. What's with that? It's because it's a more rigid algorithm. These numbers are much easier to understand. This is just how often they 5x their salary, 6x their salary, and 7x their salary within the 5,000 simulations again. So here are the metrics that are probably the most valuable for GPPs. LevX, TVal, and XVal. So the LevX is specifically just TVal minus projected ownership. TVal is the GPP threshold that you want them to hit. So it is a combination of their value percentage and their 7x percentage, which is just a way to capture both the median outcomes as well as the ceilings. That's what TVal is. So then you do TVal minus projected ownership, and that comes up with the LevX. Those two things together are nice because they tell you, okay, this player should hit GPP value quite a bit, and are they over or under owned? And then the combination of those two things is the XVal. So to just kind of expand really quick on what LevX is representing, a large positive LevX means that a player is severely undervalued by the field. That's saying that they are less owned than they have a percentage chance to end up meeting their GPP value. If a player has a very negative score, that means that they are very overvalued by the field. So that means that people are assuming that they hit their GPP values much more often than they actually do. So just looking at this chart here, you can see that Eric Pascal tonight is very overvalued. He's projected to be 58% owned. He only hits GPP value not near enough in time. His T-val is only 9.76%. So at 59% owned, he doesn't even hit his regular value or his tournament value near 50% of the time. So he is very, very overvalued by the field, making him a very bad play in GPPs. Whereas somebody like Kelly Oubre Jr. is only projected to be 21% owned, but his T-val is 37%. So 37% of the time he's valuable in GPPs, and people are saying that he's only going to be valuable 21% of the time. So these last three metrics, the LevX, T-val, and XVal, are all very, very important. They're the main things that I look at. Every day I'm going to sort by XVal, and I'm going to try to find and build lineups with the players that are the best in this column. So Steph Curry, Kelly Oubre, Andrew Wiggins, Anthony Davis, LeBron James, Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, Kyrie Irving. All those guys are undervalued by the field. If you sort it negatively, these are the players that are overvalued by the field. So Eric Pascal and Nicholas Batum, both very overvalued by the field and players that I would likely avoid in GPPs. So that is the overall tab. This will give you everything that you need to build lineups in GPPs for sure. And then we'll go over into the salary specific ranges. So the salary specific ranges show the same things, but with the overall, what these are measuring, this top finish, top 5, and top 10, this is measured against every other, where am I going with this? This is measured against every other player on the slate overall. So this is Steph Curry against LeBron James, against Dennis Schroeder, against Spencer Dinwiddie. This is against everybody overall. These salary-specific ranges are only ran between these players in these specific salary ranges. So Eric Pascal here has a 100% chance to finish as the top overall scorer in this range. Of all of the cheap players, he's by far the best play. He is also projected to be the highest owned overall by a long shot, which makes sense because he's the best play in this range. But then Luke Kennard is down here. He looks like a pretty good play in this range, but he's only going to be 17% owned. When you go over to 4,000, 5,000, Joe Harris, top finish overall in this range, in this salary range, 93% of the time, only projected to be 26% owned. Jump into the $6,000 and $7,000 range. Let's find one that's more interesting. Yeah, this $5,000, $6,000 range. So this one has a couple different players that look like they could be top finishers. Dennis Schroeder and Serge Ibaka. Both of them are owned 23% of the time. Down here, Montrezl Harrell owned 37%. His ownership projection is 37%, but he's not projected to be a very good play at all. He doesn't finish as the top overall finisher at all in simulations. So you could say that he's overvalued in this price range. We jump over into the rest. So Steph Curry in this range of the $9,000 to $10,000 range is going to be disproportionately higher owned than the rest of the players in these ranges. Sure, his projection is much better than the other ones, but on a regular slate where you're looking at this and saying, oh, well, Steph Curry is going to get 50% of the ownership and Kevin Durant is only going to get 28% of the ownership, maybe that's a situation where you want to pivot over to Kevin Durant instead of taking on the ownership with Steph Curry. Knowing that, you can look at your lineup and you can say, all right, well, if I already have a whole bunch of chalk, if I already have a whole bunch of ownership in my lineups, maybe I want to try to get off of one of the higher owned players and go on to one of the lower owned ones. Using the salary specific ranges, this is mostly where I would be making my 1v1 decisions. So say that I were to build a lineup and I have like a neat little player tool here where you can do this. And this, again, like hopefully I can build this into an app. But for now, you can just type in players that are here. Say that you build this up and your ownership percentages are really, really high. You can just go over and say, okay, well, Steph Curry is really, really expensive, so who can I swap to instead of having Steph Curry? Oh, I could have LeBron James, who's only going to be 29% owned. So then you could go back over into the overall, and you could take him instead of Steph Curry and cut down on your ownerships a little bit. The main things to take away from here are understanding the T-val and the X-val. Those are the two things that I use by far the most in the range of outcomes. But also understanding that when you look at, like, say that you were to sort this by salary, and you're looking at these players, and on a much larger slate, you're going to be able to find some 1v1 decisions that are very, very interesting in terms of the salary that you have to pay and the projections that you're seeing for players. Like, down here, between like Montrezl Harrell and Serge Ibaka, Montrezl Harrell only projects for 20.88, 7x percentage of only 3%, going to be 37% owned. Why would you not just take Serge Ibaka, who's $100 less, has a better projection, has a better 7x percentage, has a better T-val, has lower ownership, and a better X-val? Like, these kind of 1v1s are what make or break your NBA season. And that's one of the things that this range of outcomes is so good at, is breaking down the actual ability of players to do well or not. So that is kind of all of it. Like I said, there are DraftKings and FanDuel tools as well. So this has been like kind of a breakdown of those tools, and I'm going to end this recording now so that I can just put this up on the site, but I'm going to continue to answer a couple questions about things afterwards. Thank you so much for visiting paydirt.ghost.io. Again, my name is James McCool, and I hope that you like what you see.